One of the things that can drive me nuts is that I love solving problems, but a lot of times the manual work can be really tedious to actually go and implement the solution. So one of the things that's really exciting about Code Interpreter is we can help use automation to cut a lot of these tedious tasks out and allow people to focus more on problem solving. So I'm going to give you an example of this, but this is the C in the achieve. How do we cut tedious tasks through automation, freeing time for creative thought and problem solving? Now, I'm going to give you an example of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a workshop that I ran at Vanderbilt. So this was a workshop for faculty and staff to talk about prompt engineering and ChatGPT. And so what did I do at the beginning of the workshop? Well, I had a registration form. So you could go and you could sign up, you could provide your name, your email, your department, and some information about how you were currently using generative AI or ChatGPT or prompt engineering, or if you weren't at all. And sort of a key thing that I'll come back to in a minute was the department was just free text, put in whatever you want, and how you were using it was just free text, give me anything you want. Now, this could have been a mistake, and it could have ended up being a bunch of tedious and error-prone work, but I'm going to show you why it ended up not being. So I started off by going and I upload here. This is the list of people that registered for my workshop on prompt engineering and ChatGPT. Describe the data in this file, and it goes through and describes all of the data that came out of this. Now, this was just a simple Google form that was saved to an Excel sheet that I've now uploaded. So I've got the different columns that are available in this worksheet. So what can I do with it? Well, at the beginning I thought, well, who registered for my workshop? And unfortunately, I didn't actually think of doing this at the beginning, but I'll never do it, have another workshop or meeting like this again where I don't do this, because once I did it, I realized it's so helpful. But I thought, after the fact, when I'm creating this video, I should have done this, and this is what I wish I had done at the beginning, which is I said, please create a bar chart showing total registrations by department, and it goes and it shows all the different people across campus who are registering, which departments are most represented here. Biostatistics was the most represented department, so it seemed initially, and maybe that didn't change at the end, but one of the things I also noticed was it looked like there was actually some duplication in this data. And the reason for that is I just let people fill in any department they wanted, and when I started looking down at this list of departments, I realized that some of them were being repeated. There were variations on the IT department's name. There were variations on the business school's name, and so I wanted to go and fix that. So I went in and I just tell Code Interpreter, it looks like there's a lot of overlap between departments, alternate spellings. Can you list all the departments and then do some intelligent grouping of them, e.g. Owen and Owen XYZ, because some folks said Owen, some folks said Owen School of Blah, some people said Owen School focusing on this, some people said DBMI on all lowercase, which is Department of Biomedical Informatics, some put it in all uppercase, some people spelled it out, and so I had this all over the place. Now, I could have gone through like 100 entries of this manually and tried to create the list, tried to clean it all up, manually mapped and created all of this stuff. But why do that? This is the exact type of thing that we can use Code Interpreter to help us solve. And so that's what I did. So I basically asked Code Interpreter to do this. It goes through and comes up with a plan, and then it comes back with the list of different departments cleaned up to some degree. Now, when I went and read this, I noticed, hey, there's still some overlap here. Like there's this OGSM and then OGSM Financial Market Research Center, and there's also VUIT with a space between VU and IT, and then VUIT with no space between them. And so I wanted to go and clean up a little more of that. So it's not necessarily going to be perfect every time, and that's okay, because it's so much easier to just interact with it and help it refine what it's doing. And the problem solving of that gives me so much more joy than it would to sit there and manually mess with an Excel sheet through 100 different rows. So I just say, hey, look again at your grouping, critique your work, come up with a plan to fix any issues you see, and then execute that plan. So then it identifies, hey, there's inconsistent capitalization, misspelling and typos, broad grouping names, some things like that. It comes with a plan, and it goes and revises the list. And this time, it still does a pretty good job, but there's still some things left over, like OGSM and OGSM's Financial Market Research Center. And I point out some of these things to it, and it goes and helps fixes it. And I go through it a little bit more. And then what I do is I say, okay, now I want you to map all of the original departments in the registration to one of these sanitized departments. And notice I say manually. That's a little key word that I'm telling it that I want it to do it, GPT-4 to do it, and not to go and rely on Python to try to do some programmatic version of this. Because there's enough, it's small enough list of departments that it can do it directly. So it creates the mapping here, and it shows me basically how it maps all of the original department names that were in the form into actual department names and provides that listing. And then what I said is, I want you basically to save your work. Create a CSV file that has this mapping. You should have a column for original department and final department. And basically the idea is I want this, sort of messy original value in the CSV file and then the final one. Now this is to do two things for me. One is I'd like to save this so that I have this list and I can help myself in the future if I ever need to bring it back up and do this sanitization work again. I can have a starting point. But also, I want to be able to look at it and see what it's decided for every department. So I downloaded it, I looked at it, and it did a good job. It mapped everything over. Now I could have done this by hand, 100%. It's a small enough amount of data. I could have gone and done all of this by hand, but why would I do that when I can automate it? So I said, take the original CSV file with registrations, go through each registration and replace the department by looking up the final department that corresponds to the original department that has the same value in the file that you created. Now this is interesting because this is a place where if I'd thought through my naming a little better when I was building that CSV file with the mapping, then I could have made this prompt a little more straightforward to Word, but based on the way that I described things earlier, I ended up with having a prompt that wasn't as straightforward as it could have been. So think through how you word and structure and save things as you're working on it, because later when you're having to describe instructions, you're going to be stuck with how you organized or described things prior. So it would have been a lot easier if I just in that new CSV file I had final department and department, because then I could have just said go look up department in that mapping and replace it with final department. But I have this whole original department thing as well. So anyways, it goes through that, it automates the work, and now I have my updated registration list where it's gone and cleaned up all the department names into this set of department names that actually is what I want, which is it's not all these different misspellings and all these different issues. If you've ever created a form that had free text for some of these things and then at the end really regretted it, this is an example. Or if you can think of all the places on the internet or data sources that you're dealing with that are free text, unstructured in some way, and you would like to extract structure, regularize them in some way or make them more sanitized, this is a way to do it. Or even to turn them directly into data so that you can do some type of analysis. This is a great way to automate it. All those types of tasks, taking text, turning it into data, very manual, very labor intensive. You can help automate a lot of that. So I then asked it to tell me the mapping of departments to schools within Vanderbilt, because what I thought is, well, now that I've got this sanitized list, I'd really like to do this grouping by schools. And it told me it couldn't do that. And I could have gone forward with that and had some sort of inaccurate mapping, or I could have given it a mapping and have it do it, but I just said, hey, you know what? It's okay. I don't have to have that. Because I think there's a more interesting question to dive into, which is this unstructured text on how are people using it. So I know where my registrations are coming from now. I have sort of a cleaned up list of departments, but I'd really like to know something about how people are using it across campus. So you can imagine anytime you have survey data, anytime you have articles, maybe you just go and scrape a whole bunch of social media feeds, maybe you have emails from customers, maybe you have bug reports or problems. You'd like to turn that into something that is manageable and usable. You'd like to extract structure out of it. A great task for this type of automation. So I tell it the registration had, how are you using ChatGPT, Bard, Bing, etc. as a question. Can you turn this into a list of types of usage and then group the responses underneath the types? So it creates types of usage for me. Not using yet. That's a type of usage, and it then has all the different ways that people expressed not using yet, which was not at all yet, not yet, not currently, I'm not using it. I have not used these tools yet. Now I could have manually gone and done that grouping. I could also manually created the categories, but it was so much faster and easier to do it this way. It saved time, that I could use, and that took that cognitive burden off me of all this tedious mappings and allowed me to do this exploration. It also grouped it into learning and exploration, preparing to use it for my class, learning, still learning, regularly, just beginning to try, upskilling to support student requests, writing and communication, research and training, coding and development, specific tools or applications, business and professional use, and other specific use cases. Now, it's not perfect, the mapping's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect for me because I had 0 before to go on. I couldn't have done anything with this. I couldn't have turned it into any concrete analysis. So then I said, well, create 3 more possible groupings and a visualization for each grouping. So I have grouping by engagement level, not using, exploring and learning, academic use, professional use, grouping by specific task, not using. It has different things. And I don't know if I agree with these, but the whole point is it's doing it for me automatically. Grouping by usage complexity. Now, if I'd had to go through and generate all these 4 groupings by hand, even if I generated the first grouping by hand, I probably would have been done right there. That's the limit of the time and energy I would have had, because that task would have taken so much manual labor to perform that I probably would have stopped right there. But now I can go and I can say, let me look at this from a lot of different ways. Let's take that unstructured text and let's give it structure, but using a lot of different sort of buckets or categorization approaches or whatever you want to call it. And so now I have multiple ways of looking at that unstructured text. And now let's go do something interesting. Now we can start seeing how people are engaging with generative AI on campus. So we have professional use, not using, academic use, and exploring and learning. And we see a lot of people are actually using it professionally. That's how they describe their use, and that's how their use gets bucketed. And if we look at this other aspect, grouping by specific task, we see other and not using are really the biggest categories. So other, writing and communication, research and teaching, and coding and development are really much smaller than some of these other categories. So people are using it in innovative, interesting ways or not at all. And then when we look at complexity, advanced use, which is not surprising on an academic campus, there's a lot of advanced users out there, and there's a lot of people who aren't using it at all, who are showing up for the workshop. So we see both sides, which also, as somebody who's teaching the workshop, if I had this in front of me beforehand, thought to do this, then I would have had to think through, how do I balance it to make sure my advanced users get something out of it, and the people who are not using it at all get something out of it. So then what I said is, let's combine all 3 of these into a 3D visualization. So now we have a 3D visualization that's across all of these different dimensions, and I didn't like it that it was actually, overlapping here. So I thought, well, I'd like to just go through and have it create abbreviations for all the labels so I can get less overlap and I get a cleaner visualization. So I simply go and I say, can you abbreviate all of the labels so they don't overlap, / make the chart hard to read. It goes and generates abbreviations for all this. Now note, I could have gone and manually abbreviated all of this. I could have then gone and updated all these mappings, all these abbreviations. I could have done all of this. But why do it when it can generate it for me? And so now I've got my new visualization, and if I don't like this, I could go and generate 10 others really quickly, because I don't have to do the tedious sort of error-prone work of figuring out how to do all of this reshaping. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect for me in this case. Like, I'm not going to go and take this and turn it into some, really important thing. I need an approximate grouping to help me, build a mental model of the audience for my workshop. And for this type of task, it's phenomenal, right? If it's got some error, if it's not perfectly accurate, that's okay. As long as it's generally accurate, I'm going to be in good shape. I'll have a better idea of the audience that I'm dealing with. And remember, all I started with to do this was a list of registrations. I cleaned the list up into a list of departments that were sanitized. I then grouped it across different ways that people were using AI. I ran into some things that just didn't work and I didn't want to explore further. But by the end, because I wasn't stuck in this model of I have to manually go and map and do everything, it gave me more time to think about what did I want to know and see. And I could go and create all of these different, categorizations of the data, all these different ways of looking at the audience and to help better understand them. And so that's the key thing. When you go and you start using the tool to automate, to get rid of these repetitive, tedious tasks, you free up time for people to think and do more effective work because they can think more about the work, they can think more about the problem solving, they can think more about the analyses that they would like to do that they can't do today because they're spending so much time on these other tasks. So we should be looking for things that cut out these tedious tasks through automation using tools like Code Interpreter. That's where we want to go and target this type of stuff.